So to a certain degree, this is a flaw we all share. All of us will take a thing more seriously, care more about it when we or someone close to us is involved in it. None of us are capable of absolute altruism or perfect empathy. But if we have absolutely no concern for the tragedies that befall others, even while demanding vocal and unending sympathy whenever we are the ones suffering misfortune, then we've gone far beyond the universal flaw of fallen humans everywhere. In that case, we're sociopaths. We're even worse than sociopaths if we outwardly applaud and encourage bad things when they happen to others while still pulling the woe is me card should we ever get a taste of our own medicine. Many of our politicians in D.C. quite clearly fall into this second category. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has especially provided an illustration of what happens when that naturally imperfect capacity for empathy gives way to full-on sociopathy. AOC was talking to her fans on Instagram Live last night. And the fact that she has fans to talk to on Instagram is a problem in and of itself, but she began describing in dramatic and tearful terms the trauma that she suffered during the Capitol Hill riots. The description was replete with visual demonstrations, plenty of cinematic, dramatic pauses, and all the rest of it. Let's listen to some of this.
Like, I'm here, and the bathroom door starts going like this. Like, the bathroom door's behind me, or rather in front of me, and I'm like this, and the door hinges right here. And I just hear, "Where is she? Where is she?" And this was the moment where I thought everything was over. And the weird thing about moments like these is that you lose all sense of time. In retrospect, maybe it was 4 seconds, maybe it was 5 seconds, maybe it was 10 seconds, maybe it was 1 second, I don't know. It felt like my brain was able to have so many thoughts in that moment, between these screams and these yells of, "Where is she? Where is she?" And so I go down and I thought I was going to die.
And it gets even more dramatic from here. Next, she began to describe what and who she was thinking about as she confronted her own mortality. It turns out she was thinking about the American people and comforted by the knowledge that her work would be continued by those who come after her. Let's listen to that.
And I had a lot of thoughts. You have a lot of thoughts, I think, when you're in a situation like that. And like also one of those thoughts that I had was, I just happened to, be a spiritual person and be raised in that context. And I really just felt like, if this is the plan for me, then people will be able to take it from here. I had a lot of thoughts, but that was the thought that I had about you all. I felt that if this was the journey that my life was taking, that I felt that things were going to be okay.
Now, she also said that she simply cannot move on from this trauma, and anyone who demands that we move on is acting like an abuser. She said that she has been sexually assaulted before in her life, and she compared those who wish to move past the Capitol Hill riots to her own sexual abuser. And if all that wasn't enough, for one Instagram Live chat, AOC also threw the Capitol Police under the bus, the very people who put themselves on the line to protect her. She tells us about one of the police officers who came to take her to safety, and she said that she was scared of him because he was being mean about her and he was yelling. Yes, he was yelling. It's almost like, there was a mob of people this guy was trying to deal with and he didn't have time for pleasantries. Seems understandable to me, but AOC thought and still thinks that it's quite suspicious and was happy to tell us about that. The media, of course, ate all this up, insisting that her description of the riot was emotional and compelling and demanding, and that it was demanding of our attention and affirmation. And under normal circumstances, I would have little problem with anything that she said, aside from the part where she smeared the men who were protecting her. I have a problem with that. But the rest, under normal circumstances, I would say, okay, well, if that's how she felt, that's how she felt. But her description of the fear she felt and so on, it would provoke no protest for me if not for the fact that this same woman had spent the last several months ignoring, excusing, and romanticizing the very same kind of chaos that she in turn fell victim to. Now, I've played this before, but let's remind ourselves, I think it could be helpful too. Let's remind ourselves what AOC said about BLM rioting back in May. Let's listen to that.
If you're trying to call for the end of unrest, but you don't believe healthcare is a human right, if you're afraid to say Black Lives Matter, if you're too scared to call out police brutality, then you aren't asking for an end of unrest. You are asking for injustice to continue and for your people to continue to endure the violence of poverty, the violence of a lack of housing access, the violence of police brutality, and not say a damn thing. That's what you're asking for. So if you're out here calling for the end of unrest, then you better be calling for healthcare as a human right. You better be calling for accountability in our policing. You better be supporting community review boards. You better be supporting, the end of housing discrimination. You better be standing up to for-profit real estate developers that are intimidating people and trying to evict them from their homes. That's what you better be calling for. Because if you don't call for those things and you're asking for the end of unrest, all you're asking for is the continuation of quiet oppression.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you want rioting to end, it means that you just want oppression to continue. You want quiet oppression to continue. And you have no right to call for the end of unrest unless you call out real estate developers. There's a whole list of demands. But what she's doing here, of course, is she's completely ignoring and erasing the people in these communities, actual human beings who are affected by this, injured by it, damaged by it, killed by the unrest, as you call it. But for her, it's all academic. So, sure, we could get around to caring about that, but first I've got a whole list of issues we need to discuss first. Note that she said all of that only 2 days after a police precinct was invaded and burned to the ground. And on the same day that she recorded that video, she also shared an image on her Instagram giving people advice on how to protest safely. And this advice included things like wear nondescript solid-colored clothing, cover identifying tattoos. She exhorted protesters to put their phone on airplane mode and not to bring anything they don't want to be arrested with. The point of this advice, quite explicitly, was to help people commit crimes and to engage in mob violence without getting caught, or while at least limiting their legal liability if they are caught. And this is the stance she had towards rioting all through the summer. $2 billion in damage, 25 people killed. The only people she condemned throughout all of that were those who wanted the violence to end, those who wanted to be safe in their own communities again. But the shoe ends up on the other foot, and she comes face to face with the kind of anarchy that she fomented and encouraged, and she responds by crying and pointing fingers and demanding sympathy and understanding from the whole world. What happened to her is the greatest crime in history, a staggering tragedy, because it happened to her. As for the violence, death, and destruction visited upon average Americans, the convenience store owners who saw their businesses incinerated, the retail employees whose places of work were ransacked, the neighbors who were too afraid to leave their homes because of the mayhem outside, the cancer-stricken children huddling in fear in their cancer centers while BLM rioters smashed the windows downstairs, the woman in Rochester who was beaten by 2x4s while trying to stop looters from destroying her business, the retired police captain shot dead, left to bleed out in the street, random pedestrians harassed and assaulted and so on. As for all of them, AOC has no concern, doesn't care, never said a word about them, ever, still has not, never even acknowledged them. In fact, she applauds their victimization. She sits back at a distance and pontificates about their suffering and declares that their suffering is worth it because it's all in service to a good cause. Because we're sticking it to those real estate developers. Yeah, I mean, they burned down apartment complexes. That'll really show the real estate developers. No. Well, the problem is that there are people who are going to live in those homes. Actual regular people. AOC doesn't care about them. She doesn't give a damn about them. You know, it's all for a good cause. What is that cause exactly? And how does this advance it? Well, she can't say precisely. Nobody ever could. All she was sure of is that $2 billion of property damage and 25 people dead wasn't enough to earn condemnation. Indeed, anyone who condemned it was racist. And then one day she gets an up-close and personal look at what rioting is and what it feels like on the ground. And she sees that it's not just unrest. It's terrifying. She was fortunate enough to get that look, have that experience as a heavily protected public figure with cops around to whisk her to safety, which they did. Not that she has any gratitude for those people who protected her, of course. But the fact remains that she had that protection. You know who didn't have that protection? How about the elderly man in Kenosha who went to stop the BLM rioters from looting his mattress store only to be attacked, bashed over the head, and left lying on the sidewalk with a broken jaw? He had no protection. He had no defense after the fact either from people like AOC. She didn't give a damn about him or anyone else, any of the thousands of others victimized in similar ways over the summer. Quite the contrary. She romanticized the sort of violence that he fell victim to, while her Democrat pals helped to bail out the rioters and put them back on the street to do it all again the next day. She wants us now to forget all that and focus on her and her own alleged trauma. That really is the motto she lives by, isn't it? Forget all that and focus on me. Hey guys, I feel like we're not talking about me enough here. But sorry, AOC, a lot of us are just not going to play that game. We're not. We have no doubt that what you experienced was quite unpleasant. Not as unpleasant as being beaten or brutalized or shot dead, as so many Americans were during the BLM riots, but unpleasant all the same. Maybe if you admitted your role in normalizing and encouraging this sort of violence and apologized for it and held yourself to account, then we could make some progress. We could get somewhere. But you won't do that. You aren't capable. And so you just can't get the sympathy you desire. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.